Welcome back to DeFi Raiders, everyone. My name's Relentless. Today we'll be talking with LandX intern from LandX Finance, which is bringing real-world production to DeFi with tokenized agricultural commodity vaults. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to talk to you guys and hear some of the things you're doing. So first, I'd love to hear the background of how you guys got here. What led to the founding of LandX?
Well, I think it was mainly to do with the inefficiencies that are currently in the raising of capital for kind of landowners and farmland owners in particular. A lot of places around the world, it's either just not possible for kind of farmers to raise capital to kind of modernize their production facilities, or the financing that is available is quite kind of not ideal, shall we say. We thought we could improve upon that by having a system where we could kind of connect farmers to kind of sophisticated investors in DeFi, which are kind of used to dealing with fast flows of capital, and we could improve upon the current system. That's really where it came from.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because if I recall correctly, I think I read it somewhere that you guys started as like a previous OpenSea kind of project as an NFT marketplace for land, and then that was like the original roots.
Yeah, that's it. So the original idea was to kind of basically tokenize parcels of land. So we'd have an individual NFT for each separate kind of farm, and then you could literally own a section of a farm by owning that NFT, and that was all done kind of bought and sold on OpenSea. There were some issues around that system with the fungibility of the yield and the production. So it evolved over time. Over the last kind of probably 6 to 12 months, it's been in constant development. We've launched a testnet now, and it's much more of a kind of a DeFi protocol now rather than an NFT protocol.
Yeah.
Although we still use NFTs for the kind of the farmer's smart contract, if you like, because it is a non-fungible item. The kind of main thing we're looking at is kind of to tokenize real-world assets as a token that you can trade on Uniswap.
Yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to digging into the project here in a minute. So in order to kind of lay the groundwork before we dive into the project itself, let's talk a little bit about the current issues that food commodities are facing, so we can kind of understand the background thesis for why LandX is doing what it is and what you're hoping to solve on a grander level.
Yeah, so I think the main problem is that there's just not capital available. So if a farmer wants to raise capital, there's in a lot of parts of the world, that's just not a possibility for them. There's no way for them to kind of take out a loan or to kind of receive some form of capital to modernize their facilities. So what LandX is trying to do is make that capital available globally through a validator network, in exchange for what's called liens, which are like a legal contract, if you like. It's already used in traditional finance quite a lot, which is a crop share agreement, which kind of says you can have 10% of my crop per year if you give us this financing, which will allow us to modernize our facilities, and we can then produce an extra 20% a year. So it's kind of trying to create that win-win situation for farmers, while also providing these kind of real-world assets on DeFi. Yeah,
so this is focused really towards, because if you look at the grand scale of where food share comes from, right, I wouldn't say the vast majority, but the majority of food comes from smaller farmers, right? So they have issues themselves, right, with getting these bank loans, high interest, right, whether that's, whatever issues they're facing there, but that's really like one of the big ones. So this is kind of an ability to provide the capital to those smaller farmers and be able to allow investors to invest in those smaller farms, right?
Yeah, I mean, the current financial system is very, like, where it is available, and it's not available everywhere, the places in more developed countries where it is available, it's very much like the financial systems you have here, where there's a lot of middlemen that all take their cut. and there's no kind of direct route where there's capital efficiencies available, and that makes it very expensive. These are almost like payday loan type systems, which isn't good for the farmer. It's not sustainable, and there's quite a kind of a bad situation there, which we think we can offer a better product with, which is better for the farmer by connecting them to the DeFi marketplace, where there is capital available. There are people looking to invest, and you can do that almost directly. But like with DeFi, you have this open, transparent network where you can make these connections. If someone wants to sell an asset, you can directly connect them to the person that's producing that asset. I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I agree, and definitely completely agree with the payday loan situation. I mean, that is literally only profitable for the person issuing the loan. I mean, anyone who's willing to, I mean, you got to kind of, sometimes, you're faced with a situation in some of those small businesses where they don't have any other avenue to approach except something like a 30% loan, a payday loan where, it may solve the problem for a short period of time, but that problem's only going to compound. So I think you guys are addressing a couple different things here with the liquidity issues that they face, or the capital issues that they face, I should say, and then preventing them from, they're in a way they're able to. We'll dive into the specifics here, but they're kind of able to control their own future in a way with a manageable and an attractive loan type situation. So
yeah, that's the kind of. I mean, if only people would take those loans out, like, everyone knows they're bad, but if there's just no other option, then there's no other option, and that's. I mean, all we can really do is give farmers another option, an alternative to what is currently available.
Yeah, and in those situations, either face bankruptcy or take the 30% and stave it off for a little while longer. So, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. So, all right, yeah. So let's dive here into the scope of the project, right? So I want to take this from three angles, right? We've got the project's perspective, the farmer's perspective, and then the investor's perspective. So we'll start with the farmers, or we'll start with the project perspective, excuse me. So from the project perspective, you guys have a lot of different things to focus on, right? We'll talk about some of the legal stuff later on after we cover the projects. I don't want you to have to dive too much into that right now. But first, my big question is, how are you guys assessing the land that is suitable for investing, right? So what due diligence is being done to ensure investors that, hey, we're only working with quality farmers on land that is going to continuously produce yield? So yeah, so what's your guys' kind of approach? What technology are you using? And what's the overlying concept of your due diligence there?
So at the moment, there's kind of like a conflict where we need to be decentralized. We're first and foremost a decentralized network. But at the moment, we can't fully decentralize because we're still building the legal frameworks, which are different in every country. So we have what's called a validator network, and this is something that anyone can apply to be. So anyone can apply to be a validator, and validators can kind of operate on a large scale where they may be like sub-validators underneath them. So we have this kind of tree network which can go out with the local expertise of the people that live in that area and manage a lot of the kind of the off-chain aspects of what we're doing. So they would kind of have the guidance from LandX in regards to the legal contract and things like that, and that process. And then they would manage the yield coming in, and there's a system where the farmer can either kind of pay in cash or in actual crop itself. So they would kind of exercise the sale of those crops back to and kind of onboard that into DeFi as well. And they take care of a lot of that kind of system. And that's kind of, at the moment, we're doing that internally because we like. We are in talks with validators at the moment, but as far as I know, none have gone live at the moment. We're studying on testnet as well, so we're gearing up for a mainnet launch at the moment. So once we're launched on mainnet, I think that there's going to be an opportunity for people that kind of have experience with kind of farmland and financing and that whole agricultural industry. They can actually earn fees by kind of organizing this validator structure.
Okay. Yeah. So what kind of background are you looking for from the farmer? I guess is really my question.
So we have, it's not so much the background as much as we have quite kind of stringent restrictions on how much they can kind of share. So we have these crop share agreements, and they can only be for a small proportion of their total production. So a farmer can't come along and say, I'm going to kind of give you 100% of the land production. They can only give a value up to what's called a max value, a maximum allowable crop share value for that particular parcel of land. And then the validator will have to actually verify that land. I'm actually not too clued up on that side of the business, but I know they're using satellite imagery as well to actually take a satellite image of the land itself, and they can kind of compare it throughout the seasons to see, kind of to verify that the production is within what the farmer says it is and things like that. So yeah, there's and that system is still being developed as well. I think once we actually go live, there's going to be a constant evolving process there for how we kind of manage that validation process.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I was kind of intrigued as to really how, because you can't, I know you obviously have to send people, out to assess different farmlands and stuff like that, but you can't, is it feasible to constantly send a person out there every period of time to assess their crop share or but if you guys are using, satellite imagery to be able to do that, then that takes a lot of that manpower out of it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think there's still going to be some kind of the manual kind of communications. There is going to be a face-to-face
Yeah.
kind of interaction between the farmer and the validator, because a lot of farmers won't be kind of crypto natives. They're going to need some help with kind of managing the funds and accessing and kind of off-ramping the fiat currency as well. So there is going to need to be quite a lot of kind of interaction in that kind of process, and the feed is set up in a way that kind of the validators are rewarded for the work they do.
Okay, awesome. All right, so from the farmer's perspective, right? So you guys are solving number one capital issue for the farmers. Because whether they're getting pushed out by, the major productions, right, that are using all these different fertilizers and, what's it called, vertical farms, right, and they're able to mass produce crops in smaller areas, right? So you guys are and they eat up a lion's share of that financing, right? So you guys are solving the capital issue, right, and then you're also kind of aiming to, I would assume, to solve the exposure issue, right? Where people need to understand, like, hey, the majority of our crop share comes from these smaller people, because, a lot of people aren't focused on the food commodity structure here. So from the farmer's perspective, what upfront commitments are required, right? So they have to give, my understanding is a certain amount of land as collateral. You said there's a maximum, but what's the minimum? And then how much of their upfront crop yield are they required to pay?
So I believe the standard amount is around 10%. So the farmer will sign a crop share agreement to basically provide 10% of the output per year. Once they've signed that contract, that legal contract, this isn't the NFT contract, they'll then get issued a NFT, which can then be used at any time. The farmer doesn't have to withdraw their X tokens, which is the kind of the perpetual vault tokens, immediately. They can actually put that onto the system, and when they're ready, they can withdraw the X tokens, and we have an OTC desk, or they can sell them directly on Uniswap. There's going to be large liquidity pools on Uniswap, so that they can kind of exchange their tokens for USDC out. And then once they've got the USDC, they obviously have to off-ramp that. And we're going to have training available to kind of make that as easy as possible. And the OTC desk will also be able to help with off-ramping and things like that as well. So the general idea is that we can create this kind of sustainable instrument where farmers can have as easy as possible access to capital to kind of modernize their production facilities.
Okay, cool. So from the knowledge gap perspective there, then, right? So say you go to a country, right? Someone wants to, give a share of their rice farm in a country that's not very exposed to crypto or decentralized finance, or with zero understanding here, right? So you guys are working to educate them. Um, how do you make this attractive to them, right? So, okay, people want to stay where they're comfortable, right? So they understand how a bank loan works. Yes, sure, the APR or the interest might be a little bit higher. They might have to pay a little bit more, but they're comfortable with that. So how do you make this technology interesting to them, and then bridge that knowledge gap so that they understand that, yes, it's going to take a little work to understand it, but we're here to help, and the capital efficiency will be worth it.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. First of all, I don't think this is for every farmer out there. Like, if there's a guy that's 70 years old, has kind of been on his farm his whole life, crypto financing might not be for him. But there are people that are kind of more modern thinking. They're looking for new ways to do things, and they're willing to learn new methods and new kind of ways of financing. We've run some workshops. I think there was one in the Philippines recently where we had a local validator speak to people out there, just to kind of get a feel for kind of what the knowledge gap was and how much work they would have to do to kind of onboard people onto this system. I, I think the main thing is like they just want access to capital. I mean, this isn't kind of a magic wand. It's not like we're doing anything magic here. We're just making the kind of the financing that we take for advantage, like we take for granted in Western economies, available around the world. Um, and yeah, I think there's enough value there to kind of attract maybe a minority of farmers. But that's all we need.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. And because we'll talk a little bit later about with your capital, or with your initial liquidity, and the amount of land that's able to be on ramped initially. So yeah, it doesn't have to be tailored to everybody currently, but just kind of trying to get an understanding of, as blockchain technology starts to evolve and people really start to understand it and start to see the benefits, like what was the approach there. So cool. I appreciate you diving into that. So all right, so then the big piece of the pie here, right, is from the investor's perspective. So LandX kind of solves a major issue here for investors, right? Traditionally, when someone is speculating on farmland commodities futures, an investor is only gaining exposure, right, to the price appreciation or the price decline, right? So by investing in LandX, right, investors now get price appreciation plus yield in the form of the X token, right? So could you walk us through the fundamentals of X token, and then how that yield is represented by C token?
Yeah, so we've got a number of different instruments. So the X tokens themselves are designed to be non-volatile instruments. So it's not like the X token will give you exposure to the whole LandX ecosystem. There's like a governance token if you want that kind of volatility and exposure. The X tokens themselves are perpetual commodity vaults. So they're ERC 4626 vaults, which hold the underlying capital for the real world assets. So they're basically a representation of these crop share agreements. So we have 4 of these currently available at launch. There's soy, rice, corn, and wheat. And to kind of the very basics of it is that one X soy will yield a value of 1 kilogram of soy per year. And that distribution of soy, you don't get paid yearly. You can kind of claim it every block if you want. You can claim it at any time, but that's what it equates to over a year period. So each token is worth 1 kilogram of the underlying commodity, and there's some benefits in that. Once you kind of get into the details, like you think that there's huge inflation problems at the moment, and getting your yield paid out in a kind of a kilogram value is really valuable because it kind of protects your spending power. That 1X token has no real exposure to the US dollar or fiat currencies in general. Over the last 50 years, I think agricultural commodities, we looked at wheat and that had gone up, I think, around 5 to 6% per year on average. And it's accelerated recently with the increase in inflation. So there's certainly potential there because you've got the base asset as well. There's potential for kind of capital appreciation in that, as well as the annual yield. The way we pay out that annual yield is in a secondary token called C tokens, and these really don't like they can. I think they might in the future have utility to be used as collateral in DeFi protocols if someone like wants to build on top of LandX. But at the moment, I think for most users, all they're going to do is claim that yield and claim, and we have like an internal marketplace in the application which uses the rate from futures exchanges. So we get a kind of per kilogram rate for soybeans to US dollars, and we have an internal kind of market, almost similar to a automated market maker like Uniswap, but it's internal, where the user can just swap that token for USDC. So you can claim the value of that kilogram of wheat at today's market price at any time.
Okay, awesome. And so with the X token, right? So an NFT is minted to the farmer, correct? That farmer can then put the NFT on the marketplace, and users are able to, buy X tokens from, the X tokens that are allocated to that NFT. So, right. So there's four different, sectors here of crops. Is there a way for a user to buy a basket, I guess you could say, of all four tokens and be exposed to all of them, or is it all individual currently?
Yeah, we used your exact terminology. Actually, we created a vault contract, which acts like is an index fund for all four commodities. So it's called X Basket, and all it does is it holds all the four X tokens, but it also auto compounds them. So you don't have to actually stake that token. The value of the X basket will actually appreciate relative to the collateral in the vault, and the collateral is also compounding. So what it does is it takes the X tokens that have been staked within that contract, it stakes them for you within the contract, and then the C tokens that it gets, it buys more X tokens, so that the collateral is always increasing using like an auto compounding mechanism.
Okay, awesome. So okay, cool. So they have, the ability to choose between whichever commodity that they believe in the most, but then also be exposed to all of them, right? A way to diversify, if you will. So
I think that's probably one of the main selling points is the diversification away
yeah.
from kind of crypto native assets and also kind of stocks and bonds. Agriculture commodities have kind of in the past they have a inverse relationship to these products, so it can kind of act as a hedge against downside, give you spending power during bear markets. So it's something that holds value from that perspective. And I think XBasket is probably the product which would appeal to the most users.
Yeah, I agree. And then you also have the factor that, let's be real, food commodity prices are probably not going down anytime soon. So, yes, you have the yield, right? The yield from the farmer's output that is, a hedge against that decline, right? If food commodity prices were to go down. But right now you're really, if you're looking at the global scale of our food supply and the things that are happening, you can kind of almost bank on the fact that food prices are going to appreciate, making your investment appreciate, plus drawing yield on top of it. So
absolutely, I think over a long enough time period, that's almost guaranteed due to the devaluation of fiat currencies and the limited supply of food that we have. Like where we need to improve is to increase production facilities, but that's only kind of has so much capability. There's some low hanging fruit there, which is what we kind of target, but there is a limited supply. There's only so much land. There's only so much crops you can grow on that land. And that they're almost certainly going to go get more. I can't predict the prices, but over a long enough period of years, if you're talking kind of decades, then we're going to see continued inflation.
yeah, and I mean, especially with like what you said, the limitations of farmland here, right? And you see it from like the world's wealthiest people, right? For example, if anyone's unaware, Bill Gates is the single largest owner of farmland in the United States, right? So he obviously sees the value in the commodities here and the land. And so, like, as that land gets bought up and bought up and bought up, right, it becomes exponentially more valuable as it becomes limited. It's just just the general supply versus demand. So, all right, cool. And then, so I remember seeing something that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is the stable coin that you guys have talked about or mentioned, hinted at, I guess you should say, of launching. How is that? How's that stable coin going to play into your ecosystem, and what are the benefits there?
So the stable coin is trying to make the X token product more fit in for a DeFi audience. So where with MakerDAO, you would deposit Ethereum and you can mint the DAI token. So you deposit and you can mint that DAI token using the Ethereum as collateral. What we want to do is, like, Ethereum isn't the ideal asset for that. Although it's an amazing asset, it's quite volatile. And to be used as collateral, ideally what you want is something that isn't volatile, so you can't get liquidated. And that's where we think that kind of having something that's backed by a real world asset that has real production, real yield coming in could add an extra layer of value. So the idea behind XUSD is that we can basically have a layer on top of the X basket contract. So we're building the Lego bricks of DeFi here. But you have this contract which holds the X tokens in them. They're auto compounding, so we're building collateral in that XUSD contract, and that collateral that is being deposited there allows us to mint a stable coin. And we've done kind of some what's called Monte Carlo simulations about kind of what would happen if a depeg, and we need to make sure that we can kind of unwind safely if necessary, and kind of what happens with a bank run. And yeah, it's still in development at the moment, but I think it's an interesting product. I don't know for sure, but I think it will be developed and launched at some point on the LandX protocol.
Okay, awesome. All right, so all right, so just kind of we'll kind of go back here just a little bit, but to kind of tie it into something else. All right, so the X token is backed by prepaid crop share right up front, guaranteeing yield for a certain period of time. So immediately upon receiving C token, investors are able to start selling that C token with guaranteed backed liquidity. However, right, the guaranteed backed liquidity is only so deep as the upfront payment from the farmers. So this is where you kind of get into the legal stuff here, right? So a farmer prepaid a certain amount, the investors recouped his investment, continued to take profits, and now the liquidity is drying up because the farmer isn't producing the promised yield, right? So what actions as a protocol are you guys taking to protect the investor and continue to provide returns, right? So if the farmer is not upholding his end of the bargain, how are you able to continue to recoup profit and return that to the investors?
Okay, so from the crop share agreements are backed by the underlying land. So if the farmer doesn't actually keep up the crop share payments, they have just over a year, I think. So they have to prepay 1 year's worth of yield to the system. So if there is like a failed crop or something goes wrong, then there's a little bit of a buffer there just to protect everyone involved, basically. If there is something more kind of a more long-term underlying problem, then obviously for every jurisdiction it will be different, and we haven't actually gone through this in practice yet. This hasn't happened in real life. But the idea is to not actually repossess the farmland, but we'd actually bring another farmer from the community to take it over that land. So they would take ownership of the land and then take on the crop share agreement. So they'd essentially buy the land for $1, and then they would then take on the liability of the crop share agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you don't repossess it. You just kind of now control it and allow someone else to continue to produce that yield on the land. So that's like its own legal hurdle, right? So, I mean, what? Yeah, I mean, you guys have to do a ton of background work here, right? When operating in certain countries to make sure that you're able to actually execute those legal contracts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too clued up on the legal side of it, but my understanding is that this is something that's like this isn't something that it's just LandX is using. The crop share agreements are used in traditional finance as well. So it's kind of there's in certain countries at least there's kind of legal infrastructure in place already for us to kind of use as a framework for how this system should be kind of rolled out.
Okay, cool. So you guys are just kind of focusing on what's already there, what you know works, and what you're able to actually to execute with in a legal perspective. Okay. Um, all right. So kind of a full visual here just to kind of tie it in, and then I want to talk a little bit about initial liquidity, your launch, and your roadmap. So just kind of a full visual, just to for anyone who came in late or hasn't heard it all, right? So LandX, you guys go out, you assess a farmer and their land, right? The farmer agrees to a contract, pays X amount of upfront yield, plus commits a percentage of their land as collateral in order to secure capital, investor, and then they get that contract in the form of an NFT, which they upload on the marketplace. The investor can go on, buy X tokens, right? And from their X tokens, they receive C token from the upfront payment and continued yield produced by the farmer, right? That's the quick TLDR, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to tie that all back together just to make sure in case we lost anyone or if anyone joined in lately or late. All right, so let's launch into kind of your liquidity on launch, right? So what do you guys currently have in the form of liquidity as you go to launch, and what are the plans going forward to draw further liquidity?
It's actually quite a unique situation that we've got some really good founded investment involved. So I believe we have $4 million worth of investment in the protocol as a whole. And those are in exchange for governance tokens, which the investors have actually locked for, I think it's a 4 years like cliff and then 4 years vested after that. So the founders are really kind of invest in the long-term prospects of the project, which is what kind of got my interest in it when I first joined. And then aside from that, we also have a private round, a public round. The private rounds are currently being conducted now. We're doing a testnet kind of dress rehearsal launch of the token. So we've got an LNDX token as well, which kind of is the governance token, which earns platform fees and gets kind of it's a utility token for kind of government variables and risk variables and things like that as well. And that's going to be launched on a public sale as well sometime in 2023, probably early 2023. That all of that together should mean we have ample funding for really quite significant liquidity pools, which is quite important in this project because if a large farmer comes on board, we need quite large liquidity both on decentralized exchanges and with the OTC desk to kind of manage that. We want to kind of keep these assets relatively stable. We certainly don't want too much downside kind of pricing pressure from the sale as we bring on new farmers. So having liquidity there allows us to manage that in a way that we can kind of bring on farmers but not have the immediate selling pressure of that kind of affecting the price of the X tokens and having that as a artificially volatile instrument, which shouldn't really be volatile.
Okay, awesome. So, all right, that covers kind of like your financial liquidity. How much land do you guys have under contract that you're going to be able to launch with? And then how much land are you capable of taking on initially?
So that depends on the demand. So I can't remember. I was told the figure and I can't remember what it was. I think there's something like commitments for, I think it's 10 million US dollars worth of land at launch. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the rough value. And I like it, as far as how fast we can expand. some of it depends on the kind of the demand for our products. So how, like, we can only kind of bring on farmers when it's responsible to do so, and we need to create the demand for that in DeFi. I think it's hard to predict at the moment, given the current market conditions, how that's going to pan out. I think we have a great product personally. Also, I have a bias, but I think there's a strong product there. And I think that if we can get the right kind of funds and maybe like look at DAOs that want to kind of diversify their treasury holdings, then there's the potential that we can kind of build some long-term partners in the space. And we can, I mean, it's going to be a lot like in DeFi terms. I think there's the potential to build a really big protocol here. I mean, particularly products like XBasket and XUSD. From the models we had, the XUSD product was kind of delivering about 14% APR on a USD stablecoin. That's not like in a Luna Ponzi kind of way. That's actually sustainable, built on real world yields. So I think that's the kind of product which we haven't really seen that in DeFi yet. And if the market conditions prevail and we launch at the right time, then I think it could be something that really takes off in a big way. And we're going to have to, a lot of our work then will kind of not be focusing on the DeFi side, but focusing on the validator side and getting set up and expanding in a way that doesn't kind of, we don't lower the quality of what we're doing at the validator level. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, maybe I phrased it correctly. I wasn't really asking what's your expectation for how fast you can grow, right? That's an unrealistic question to ask. So I'll give an example, right? So say at launch, you guys have, right, farmlands are denoted in hectares, right? So say you launch with 5,000 hectares of farmland. All right, what is the total amount of hectares of farmland that you guys are currently capable of managing with the scope of what you've built? Not how quickly will it come on, or how quickly will you get to that number, but what's your capability?
I mean, from the actual system itself, like the smart contracts, the decentralized application, there's no real limit there. There's not I can't think off the top of my head of anything, any kind of bottlenecks on that side of things that would limit how fast we can grow. I think the limits will be on the personnel and the validator network, to how far we can kind of expand that out in a way where we don't lose, we don't kind of have, we kind of don't degrade what we're doing by kind of expanding too fast, and that have to be a judgment call. I don't think there's a kind of a figure like we can double in size in the first year. I wouldn't like to guess at how fast we can go from the launch stage to the kind of the final view of what I think LandX could become.
Okay, awesome. And then, so do you guys have a projected launch date, or is it a launch window that you guys can share?
Yeah, at the moment it's Q1 2023. We're currently doing a testnet launch. So we're launching on Gorelli testnet. We've already done one launch, but we're doing a dress rehearsal. So we're going to go through the whole process of doing a token generation event that starts on the 5th of December. If anyone would like to kind of try that out, then we have kind of a full set available where you can kind of get a allocation of free funds on the testnet. They're not worth anything in real life. They're just to kind of experiment with on the platform. So we'll start with the token generation event and then go forwards with the main platform launch. I think we'll run that probably up until around Christmas. There's a trading competition as well. So there's actually cash prizes available for anyone that can kind of trade and stake the assets in a way that kind of increases their holdings from a return on investment perspective. And then once that's done, we've had a security audit done now. That's come back. So I think we're pretty much ready to launch. So yeah, my prediction would be Q1 2023.
Okay, awesome. And then just as far as your roadmap, outside of launch, what what do you guys have planned for that maybe we haven't covered that you guys are looking to roll out at some point?
So roadmap, let me just bring this up. So we've got the after the mainnet launch, we've got the X basket index launch. So that product will probably come later after the main protocol. So that'll be the index fund containing the 4 commodity vaults. After that, we're going to be looking at 2 products. One of them is XUSD, which you've mentioned. And the design systems are still in place for that. So that will probably be pushed back to the latter part of 2023, probably Q3. And then we have a DAO governance system that we're working on. So that will need to be launched as well, probably in the latter part of 2023 as well. And another thing that I know certain members on the team are really keen to do is to kind of make these assets cross-chain. So I think there's going to be a system in place where we can easily expand certainly the assets and the staking ability for the assets across to both layer 2s on Ethereum and maybe potentially alternate layer 1s as well. Probably EVM layer 1s at this stage.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my follow-on question. What do you might have covered, and I just might have missed it. What are you launching on initially?
So it's Ethereum mainnet is launching on, and that'll be our main protocol, if you like. That will be where all the base assets are. That's where all the main contracts will be. And then we're looking to use, I think it's layer 0 Stargate products. Stargate's layer 0 products that to use kind of cross-chain messaging to communicate between smart contracts on Ethereum mainnet to say something like Optimism or Arbitrum or another layer 2, where we can kind of bridge these assets across. We can use messaging to kind of do something with the yield so that we have the ability to both to bridge assets across to layer 2s, and then hopefully someone can actually use the layer 2 to go on Uniswap, buy the asset and stake it, so that although the farmers entities on that side will just be on Ethereum mainnet, there's the ability to use layer 2s for kind of DeFi users that don't want to pay the Ethereum fee, maybe only dealing with small amounts, or just want to experiment on layer 2s. That option will be there available, and it's kind of like the horizontal expansion plan for the DeFi side of things.
Okay, and then sorry, I meant to ask earlier. I think it's great that you guys are already focused on cross chain, right? That's kind of like really if you want to be competitive, you kind of have to. And then from what I meant to ask earlier, from the investor perspective, is there a minimum amount that they can invest into this, right, in order to purchase an X token, or can they buy, is there a minimum amount?
No, it's just a normal ERC20 token to 18 decimals, so you could buy like next to nothing of it. It'll be a USDC market, so I think that's 6 decimals, so you can buy 100 thousandths of a US dollar or something like that.
Okay.
So it's a tiny amount. There is limits on the token generation event, but it's maximum limits. I think we have different tiers for the public sale of the LNDX token, ranging I think from 1,000, which is a standard whitelisting. And then we have some like community members like the Amiga and Alpha farmers on our Discord. They get kind of priority access and slightly higher limits as to what they can buy and what they can allocate to the token generation event.
Okay, but still limits to prevent one person from coming in and buying up the lion's share of everything, to control kind of the yield.
Yeah, there's no limits on the X tokens themselves, and there's nothing we can do really to limit that in the post market. It's just in the token generation event we want to kind of limit, and there's value for us to have a broad community owning a little bit of the token rather than one large whale owning all the tokens.
Yeah, I agree. Because what you see with a lot of projects, right, that do, these no capped LGEs is that, one person goes in and, buys a significant share, and then that kind of deters investors because it's like, well, do I really want to risk investing in this while and driving the price up and then getting dumped on and being left holding the bag? So.
Yeah, it's always a concern. I mean, there's nothing you can really do from a protocol's perspective once you've launched to kind of control that and avoid the pump and dump groups if they want to pump and dump your token. Because it's decentralized. I mean, there's value in that decentralization. you basically, as developers and kind of founders, you relinquish control of a lot of the kind of systems that we have in place to kind of prevent that kind of thing in traditional finance. There's no way to block someone from, or we wouldn't want a way out. Certain tokens you can blacklist addresses and stuff, but for us, that's not like really a viable option. It's not something we want to do, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so I guess my last question is kind of just for you. What message about LandX do you want to put out there for the audience? What last comments do you have?
I'd say thank you for listening. Thank you for taking it all in. I'd like to say that I think what the team here are doing is pretty unique and interesting. I think the tokenization of real world assets is a really strong opportunity for Ethereum and DeFi, and kind of building that, bringing kind of real yield into the DeFi system rather than having kind of Ponzi mechanics and kind of speculation. I think this is a step in the right direction towards sustainable ecosystems. Yeah, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And if you could, would you mind sending me some of the information on that trading competition? I know I have some people in my community that would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a link to it.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, thanks so much.
Cheers.
Thanks so
Take
much
care.
for joining us. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Grateful for your time and your support. Blessed to be able to spend this time with you and our wonderful guests. If you're hearing this now on YouTube for the first time, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button to help us expand our reach. Once again, I'm Relentless from DeFi Raiders, and we'll see you next time.